Hello. Today I'm going to review... What was it again? Oh, Raccoon City. No, that's wrong. Resident Evil Welcome to Raccoon City. There it is. I thought it was pretty good for a video game adaptation. Not that that's hard to do. As I said before, most video game adaptations suck. And I almost want to just kind of, I don't know, like overanalyze this movie, but also in the process overanalyze why video game movies usually don't work. Maybe I'll do that. But first I'll talk about this movie anyway. It starts out in an orphanage, and you kind of see some creepy stuff going on, and then you realize like, oh, this is Chris and Claire when they're kids and in an orphanage. And after that, like, immediately cuts to the beginning of Resident Evil 2 with, like, the truck driver driving in, and then, but Claire is with him this time, and I don't know. There's just, like, minor differences from the games, because it's doing, like, the first and second game together, and obviously they can't do all of both games, so it's kind of just, like, a good mix of, like, events that happen in both games to kind of make its own story. And it has a lot of action and a lot of horror elements, which I was a little surprised by just because the first movie... I've only ever seen the first Resident Evil movie, except this one. This one, I guess, is a reboot, so you don't have to see any of the other ones, but I've only ever seen the first one. And that one was basically just a dumb action movie. I mean, I like dumb action movies. All action movies are dumb. I always call them dumb action movies. Even the smart ones are dumb. They, like, removed all the horror elements and just, like, didn't keep the tone in any way and basically just made it yet another Matrix ripoff, because I just remember there being a lot of slow-motion action fights. It was just like, oh, just like the Matrix, pretty much, except with zombies for some reason. But this one definitely kept the tone of the video games, and, like, it really captured that very well, I thought. And even though, like, I feel like in almost every scene... Just because I'm, like, such a fan of the video games, I've played through all of them multiple times, except for the two latest ones. I haven't played those at all for some reason. I should. I don't know why I haven't. But this definitely captured the tone of the first two games, of just having that kind of mix between, like, the tense horror you get in those games and, like, the very thrilling action, I guess. I feel this also has a lot of good elements from the games, like the set pieces. Almost every room or every location they used, I could, like, pinpoint exactly where they were. Like, oh, they're in the mansion, or like, oh, this is a part of the police headquarters or whatever. There wasn't, like, a whole lot of monsters, but every time there was one, I thought it was kind of cool. The liquor looked really strange, I thought. That was the only one that I thought was kind of weird looking. Like, I think they were trying to make it look too realistic or something. I just felt it, like, definitely needed a little more work computer graphics-wise or something. I'm such a big fan that, like, anytime something was different at all, I was just like, oh, that's wrong. But usually when that happens, it annoys me, and I'd probably, like, be like, well, they tried really hard, but, you know, got all this shit wrong. But then it was never anything that made me, like, really upset, I guess. It was always just something like, that's wrong, but I'm okay with it. Like, one of the things was, Leon asked Claire, like, how'd you get so good with guns? And she says, well, after I escaped from that horrible orphanage, I had to learn off the streets, or something like that. And I had to figure it all out by myself, pretty much. I learned to survive. And I was like, that's wrong. In the game, like, Chris teaches her, but it's, like, such, like, a minor difference. Like, who cares? And also, like, they changed their backstory because they weren't orphans in the game. Oh, another thing that I just thought was, like, a weird change was that Leon and Jill don't look anything like they do in the video games. It didn't really, like, take me out of it or anything. It kind of annoyed me at first, but then I was like, oh, no, these guys are fine. But it was just weird, I thought, because it felt like Chris and Claire look exactly like they do in the video game. Like, they even had the same outfits and everything. Leon did too, because he's just in a cop outfit, but I don't think Jill had the same outfit, so it was just kind of weird that, like, it's like they went out of their way to make sure Leon and Jill had their own new look, while Chris and Claire were exactly the same. It was just a strange choice, I guess. As kind of like a zombie adventure movie of sorts, I'd say this was really good. And it captures the style of the game, so any fans of the old games would definitely like this movie a lot, because it does a really good job of just capturing, like, the story and style of those old games. Something that the older movies, from what I've heard, I've only seen the first one, like I said, but from what I've heard, they just throw most of the story and everything in the trash and just keep, like, the monsters and things like that. basically similarity in name only. And monsters, I guess. Everyone likes a good liquor. That's what she said. What? And you can tell that the person who wrote and directed this movie definitely really likes the games. He's definitely a fan and was passionate about the games and passionate about making this movie because he really does a lot to capture that tone of the games and that style. Also, one of the first lines in the movie, once it cuts to the present day, because it starts at an orphanage, like I said, is Jill and Chris and Wesker all like in a diner. It works in the film. I know it's kind of a weird scene picturing them in the games, but the characters are different. But they're like making a bet of if she can wake up the rookie, pretty much. And she does, but then she like takes Chris's sandwich and he's like, "Hey, what are you doing?" And she says, "Nah, this is I won. This is a Jill sandwich now." And I was like, Jill sandwich. This guy knows. This guy knows what I want. Which, if you haven't played the game, that doesn't make any sense, but don't worry about it. You don't need to know. I'm sure you just Google it. Here's something about video games that isn't true for movies. That's that the main character in video games usually doesn't have a whole lot in the ways of personality, if they have anything at all. If you remember, like the original Mario, he just jumped. You know, I mean, he didn't say or do anything. And that's because that's so the character can just project themselves onto that character. Because you're playing that character becomes you as you're playing them. But in movies, your main character needs to have a personality. And I think they do a good job of giving each character their own, like, personality, but it's, like, just enough for each character. It's like you see just enough of Jill to understand, like, oh, she's kind of this girl. Or you see just enough of Leon to be like, oh, I get it. He's a rookie and new and maybe a bit clumsy and stuff. And he kind of grows a little bit. But, like, you know, like no one really has enough characterization to have character growth. I mean, there's, like, none. For any character, really. I mean, like I said, there's a little bit for Leon, but I don't know if getting slightly better at killing things as you continue killing things is really character growth, especially in an action movie. Actually, the character I think who had the biggest character arc in the whole thing was Wesker, because he starts out as kind of just like another dude, you know, like another bro, basically, on the team. Like in the games, he was originally the leader of Stars, and then when he betrayed everyone, it was like a much bigger thing. I mean, it still didn't have like a lot of weight to it because it was a video game, and also the first Resident Evil had like the worst voice acting in any video game ever. Almost. It has to be up there, like top 20 games, worst voice acting ever. It's definitely one of the most famous. It's famously bad voice acting. So it was hard to like really relate to anyone outside of like just laughing at them, laughing how bad the voice acting is. That's where the Jill sandwich comes from. Just because these lines were like terrible. I remember one of my favorite lines is, "I better give the lockpicks to you, Jill, the master of unlocking." Just like really campy and terrible. Most video games characterization really doesn't matter. Story doesn't really matter in most video games. Just make something that's fun to play. And if you have like a good story with good characters, that's a plus, but it's not the only thing, you know? It's not even the main thing. You just need a game that you can play first. That can be played and is fun to play. Like, those two are way more important than having a good story with good characters in a video game. And that's one of the reasons why Resident Evil did so well, because they made it like a creepy mansion with a great spooky atmosphere and tons of zombies to kill. And it could also kill you just as easily, especially if you ran out of ammo and shit. Because ammo consumption was really big in that game. Or like conserving your ammo, or like resource management and all that. But none of that stuff really translates on screen. What you need first in a movie is the exact opposite. First, you need a good story and good characterization, because you know and then is it fun to watch on top of that, you know? And I think this does really well with the story part. He does the writer director, I don't know his name, I'm sorry. I could look it up. I'll look it up. Johannes Roberts. He did a really good story, you know. He does a really good job of combining the two games from the two stories. But if I hadn't played the games and didn't know who these characters were already, I think by the end of the movie, I might just be like, who are these people? I don't care. Except maybe for Leon. And Wesker, I might have been like, Wesker seemed like a good guy, kind of, except not really. He wasn't. But he did have a bigger character arc than anyone else in the movie, because like I said, he starts off different from how he is in the games, but like slowly kind of turns into how he is in the games. But everyone else, it's like they gave us just enough characterization to show us who they are, but not enough to have them grow as characters, because there's like almost nothing there. They don't really have a lot of characterization in the games themselves. Even the later games where they're given more story and their dialogue and everything, and the dialogue is better than in the first game, at least. This is something that movie adaptations of video games should maybe work harder at, I think, or maybe think about harder before they start making the movie, just in that, like, because I know these characters aren't very interesting in the video games they're even based on. I mean, Claire's whole storyline in every game she's in is basically she's trying to find Chris and nothing else. Leon, I actually think, is maybe the most interesting character, just because he has more characterization than most of the other characters. Jill is a close second. But Chris and Claire have always been kind of boring to me, because they don't really have much characterizations. Chris especially. Claire at least is looking for Chris and has some unique qualities to her that make her different, but Chris is like the most generic person in the world. He's kind of a Boy Scout too. He's kind of like Captain America if Captain America didn't have any interesting qualities. But one thing I do appreciate about this movie is there was definitely a lot of passion behind it. And I think that's something that's missing from a lot of video game movies, is that I feel that first off, studios almost always just hand it off to someone at random. It doesn't matter if they've even played the game before, and then they just do something at random. That's when you get things like the Super Mario Brothers movie or Street Fighter, if anyone remembers that movie. But when people have real passion for what they're making, or have passion for the game that it's based on, you can tell that there's like a major boost in quality, you know, because they understand the game. People who don't understand video games and they're making movies about them will obviously make something that's not like the video game at all, because they don't understand it. He does this right because he captures the tone of the video game, but he's not trying to capture how video games feel to the player, which I think a lot of adaptations fail at, because they're trying to like capture that like the moment in Legend of Zelda, any Legend of Zelda, you pick up any item for the first time, you hold it up, and there's like a type of thing like that. It makes you excited because you just did that, and you have a new item. Let's see what it does. It's crazy. But if they did like that in a movie, you know, unless it was a comedy and they're doing it to make fun of that, they actually do that in the Legend of Neal, now that I'm thinking about it, which is hilarious. Look it up if you haven't seen it. But if they're doing that seriously and like really hammering it home, and I've seen that happen before, not in that same context, but in the Pokemon anime show had a bad habit of doing that, of like, oh, here's a new Pokemon, let me pull out my Pokedex, oh look, here's all the information about this Pokemon, and like, it's just, you know, it's like in a video game, again, that's more exciting than it is on a show. It just becomes really repetitive and boring. But this was definitely a lot more fun. I would like to keep analyzing this and trying to figure out what's wrong with video game movies in general. I think I'll just leave it there, actually. Maybe I'll make a more professional-ish video about that. Why is every video game movie flawed? Except Free Guy and Wreck-It Ralph. But those don't count because they're not based on video games specifically. I'm trying to think if there's any like really good video game. I like the Mortal Kombat movies, but I wouldn't call them like good movies exactly. They're fun movies. They're really fun, but they don't take themselves seriously. I would say they're fun and campy. I guess the Silent Hill movie, I kind of forgot about that entirely, actually. That I'd say is a good movie. This movie jumps between like two sets of characters constantly. It's so constant and frequent that you don't really get to know either group. You know, you kind of get to know, you kind of get to know everyone, but only in the, like I said, like just the like really surface level, no need for character growth, just getting to know everyone. It's like if they're setting up for some really awesome sequel that starts like right after this movie, and then that's where all the character growth is, I think that would maybe make it a little forgivable. Just as it stands, this movie, I think, would only be good if you played the games and know who all these people are already, just on that level. If you're just looking for a fun, like, horror/action movie, it's pretty good. I'd say the story holds up. The action and monster effects, except for that liquor, maybe, are all really good, though. It just lacks that characterization that really holds a movie together, you know, because you need, like, at least one strong character for people to, like, latch onto and root for, you know, or root against if they're if it's more of an anti-hero situation or whatever you call it. I think it's still called an anti-hero, even though anti-hero also means the hero that doesn't have a lot of positive traits, like Deadpool or the Punisher. I think I went off a tangent there, and maybe I didn't finish what I was talking about, but I'm now going to rate this movie because I think I basically said all I have to say about it. Maybe. Oh, why wasn't Rebecca Chambers in it? They added Sherry Wilson or whatever her name is, Sherry from Resident Evil 2, but no Rebecca, no love for Rebecca. I mean, I know she's kind of annoying, but you know, she's only in the first game. You might as well give her like a cameo or something. Oh, another thing I noticed, and I still don't know if this is right, but I'm pretty sure like they had this nurse every time they did cut to the flashbacks with them in the orphanage. They always had this nurse with them, and I'm pretty sure she's wearing like the exact same nurse outfit in the first Silent Hill, and I was just wondering, like, is that like a nod to Silent Hill or something? The video game, not the movie, I mean. Okay. I'm gonna give it a 9 out of 10, because I thought it was very good and a very good adaptation. And video game adaptation is so hard to do well, but this was really well done. But I'm gonna subtract a point for the poor characterization, but it was just 1 point because it still has like that dumb action movie vibe, and it also like horror movie themes and stuff, and like characterization really isn't nearly as important in like a horror or action movie as it is in like a drama or something. And I don't really expect that. And again, the characters they're based on really are kind of boring. But I still kind of expected a little more. Just a little more for each character would probably have been enough. Even if it padded the runtime out a little bit. But this movie's under 2 hours, which is rare already. But this could have been, you know, 2 hours long just to give everyone just like a little extra. Or give someone else like an arc, except for Leon getting a little better at shooting people. Like Claire felt like a main character at first, but as soon as it cut to everyone else, it kind of lost any flow, really, with her anyway. Like after when it cut back to her again, she was just like everyone else, just kind of a generic person. Still a main character, but like not enough about her to make her seem like the main character. And this has too many characters. The problem just comes from trying to combine 2 games together, and I think he does a good job just story-wise, but that does make it so we're like constantly cutting between these 2 groups of 5 or 6 different people in total, and it just makes the story less cohesive. And I'm not saying we needed to like stick with just one person the whole time. We could have still had it jump between them. It would have been nice to have at least one person feel more like the main character than the other 5 people. Alright, with that said, Resident Evil is one of the best video game series in my opinion. Definitely one of my top 3 favorite game series. The other 2 probably being Final Fantasy and Fallout. Lots of Fs. Oh yeah, final score for this was 8 out of 10. I don't know if I said that. Maybe I did. Who cares? Whatever. Like and subscribe if you want. Tune in tomorrow for more reviews, maybe.
Rage on that beat, going crazy.